Okay, we've allowed for about a half an hour for comments and questions. Please keep your comments brief. I will interrupt you if you get too long, just so we can accommodate more. For some of you who know, I actually have two hats. I'm not wearing one of them tonight. I'm also a retailer on State Street. 30 years ago, I and my partner took a company public called Men's Warehouse. We almost closed our store on State Street a couple of years ago. Fortunately, I continue to be on the audit committee and the board of directors, and I was able to avoid that eventuality. But it forced us into a process to rethink what we did with State Street, our State Street store, and how we could build it into the future. That store today is outperforming what it was doing 3 years ago, and our entire company is outperforming the retail industry. If you look at our last quarter release 2 days ago, we continue to fly in the face of the retail crisis. Happy to talk about that some other time. I'm here tonight as a moderator. And what I'd like to do is get the best questions and comments out of you and out of the panel. So if I could have the very first question back in the back of the room, please.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Jason Dominguez with the City Council. I just want to explain, because there's 4 of us here and we constitute a majority, we're actually not allowed to comment on future policy. It's under the state's Brown Act. I was a city attorney in LA and a county council here, so trust me, it's one of the weirdest laws. It's one of California's unique laws where we're not allowed to deliberate unless we're at an actual open notice council meeting. So we're here, we're listening, and we're open to any comments you have, and we'd love to meet with you after this meeting, but we're not allowed to talk about policy.
Thanks, Jason. And we knew that ground rule going in, which is why no one up here is from the City Council, and the mayor, as you know, is here, as well as other council members. So thank you. Right here.
Hi, my name is Jack Ferry, and I ran for city council to represent the downtown district in this last go-round. First of all, sincere thanks to all of you. Amy, first of all, my wife is from Victoria in Vancouver Island, and the only reason we're allowed to stay here in Santa Barbara is because of your store. It's the only thing that keeps the retail experience that she's used to in Vancouver Island. So thank you so much. Hal, you know my tremendous respect for you and all your depth of knowledge and ideas. I would love to hear you talk about your ideas for State Street and opening up to more pedestrian experience at the cost of maybe some automobile traffic flow through. Angel, so you alluded to the revolution in transport that was the train and how that revolutionized business and distribution. And one of the ideas that is really taking the nation by storm is publicly owned internet, because there are internet provider monopolies right now, particularly one here in our community that is siphoning off a lot of expendable income from residents. So if we could have gigabyte speed internet in our retail area, which dovetails into finally Ken, so we're talking about experiential retail outlets. In order for that to happen, we need to have affordable and world-class internet. And so if we could do that by having the public sector sort of spearhead an effort to own the internet as we the people, I think that's something we should talk about. That's an exciting idea.
Okay. So thank you, Jack. Try to keep your questions or comments to one subject. I'm going to ask each person on the panel who would like to comment on Jack. Please do so. Al, you want to start?
The need for a pedestrian-oriented experience, I think, is critical. And if you look at where the greatest sales have been over the last 3 decades, many of them were in malls. Nobody drives down the middle of a mall. But I think that it's partly just the way in which it gets framed here. We need to stop talking about closing State Street, and we need to start talking about opening the street to great new experiences. And it's the experience that you have on that street which will attract people. If people hear about closing the street, they think they're losing something. They think that somehow they're going to give something up. But if they see something is happening, whether it's a farmer's market, whether it's an auto show, whether it's an arts exhibit, or whether it's First Thursday, it's something they want to go participate in. And I keep saying, and have said for a long time, create more and more opening of experiences on State Street, and one day somebody will just notice it's not open to automobiles anymore.
I think, as has been mentioned, but I think we cannot understate the importance of having a vibrant housing component to State Street. The fact that people live there and walk everywhere and create an energy that doesn't exist and doesn't shut down at 5 or 6 o'clock is vitally important. You know, and I hesitate to make this comparison because it's so old world. I was just in Venice, Italy, and all the people who work in downtown seem to live right upstairs from their shops. I mean, it's a fantastic element that creates an ownership of the street. And in that sense, the vibrancy, the energy becomes a holistic component, which gives people not only a sense of place, but a sense of ownership. And it creates for people a real magical kind of environment. And I think we are perfectly suited for that exact thing. I learned during the campaign that the Paseo Nuevo is the oldest mall in America. I wasn't aware of that. The original little part where where the Paseo restaurant is, that whole area was originally designed, and the El Paseo, that was originally designed as, and not the Paseo Nuevo, did I say El Paseo? I meant the El Paseo. Anyway, that was designed to have housing upstairs, as in Spain, and retail downstairs, and it works. It works everywhere it's done, and that should be a big element of how we rethink our downtown.
I guess just briefly on broadband, absolutely agree. I don't think there's any question but that the ability for this community to ensure that we've got high quality broadband access for everyone is quite possibly the most important issue that we all face. It's the great equalizer. It ensures quality education. It ensures full access to everything the world has to offer. I co-chair a tri-county group that is looking with assistance from the state at how to increase broadband speeds in the area. We recently came out with grades for Santa Barbara. They were not good, but I can tell you that there's a lot of folks both in the private and public sector that are looking at how we can ensure that that happens.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Dan Burnham. 3 elements, it seems to me, are necessary. One is, of course, good ideas, and it's no question we have an abundance of good ideas, but I wanted to be more specific. There are other towns of roughly our size and our situation that have dealt with similar problems. What have we learned from them? 2 come to mind. One is Palm Beach, Florida, and another one is, I want to say Huntington Woods, Illinois. It's not the name. Highland Park, Illinois. And they're same size that we are. They've had the same issues that we have. Their city council and their mayor looked at these issues and came up with some solutions. Fixed up the storefronts, adjusted demands on the owners of properties that were vacant for too long and surcharged them, forced a certain look for lease signs. I found the statutes. I sent these to every member of the city council and the mayor to say, why don't you learn from these people? I'd never heard one word back. Another subject of, so one idea is to have ideas, another one is to actually do something about it. Second is to identify the impediments. It seems to me that we all know what the impediments are because we hear them all the time. Developers don't want to come into Santa Barbara because they don't want to deal with Santa Barbara because the only people who actually get the jobs are these poor souls that have learned how to torture themselves to get anything done here. So we don't get good ideas from people outside. Everybody knows that the time cycle in getting permits is ridiculous. I've asked what measures do we have about the time cycle from idea to building. The answer was from city council, we don't have anything to do with that. Well, don't you appoint the members of this? Well, yeah, but we don't really look at that. Well, there's a problem. Seems to me the third problem, therefore, is leadership. You never hear about this. I don't know who stands up and talks about this. The mayor's not talking about it that I ever hear about. City council, they seem to run away as soon as the issues come up. So it seems to me we don't have to make this overly complicated. We learn from what other people are doing. We identify the impediments and get rid of the impediments and get up and talk about it all the time, not just us, but also our city leaders who are here in this room. We don't hear enough from them on this in any practical sense. There you go.
Thank you. Then, good. No, this gentleman right here. Thanks, Christine.
Thanks. So one of the things a lot of cities are doing, and I could rattle off some, but one of the impediments to starting a new business is the upfront costs of starting a business like yours, Amy's, because if you're a small startup, you may not have the capital. To start a retail restaurant is a minimum of $120,000, and the median is $275,000. So these are huge costs. So what a lot of the cities are doing, like rattle off a few, Detroit, San Jose, Austin, Baltimore, Chicago, are doing a lot with pop-ups. And what they're finding is they can get entrepreneurs in with pop-ups because the upfront costs are a lot less. They can try a 30-day trial. They have a pop-up permit. It's a different kind of permit. It's not the same permitting process. It's a same-day permit, $75, and you can run for 45 days, and then you can go another 45 days if you want. So there's a bunch of cities that are tackling this, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're a 30-year-old chef who maybe worked for somebody else, and you're talented, but you don't have $275,000 sitting around. What's your option? If you want experientials, cool, neat businesses in Santa Barbara, you want to attract these kind of people, not major brands. So a pop-up gives them a chance to set up a business, run it for 30 days, see if their idea works, and maybe they'll convert. And just for a quick example, I did some research. Detroit has something called Hatch Detroit, and they had 14 conversions into full-time leases out of there, and they have 16 people who are still working on it. Some ideas aren't going to fly. They're going to fail. But it's a low-cost way to get entrepreneurs into these businesses with different kinds of businesses, not big-box businesses. So it's something to think about. There's a ton of examples. There's actually, Oakland has some great examples, and there's a woman there who did so well with it, she now started this thing called Pop-Up Hood, which is a small business, like an incubator, to get these going. If you think of this as an incubator problem like we do in high tech, this is a good fit, and there's plenty of open space for the incubator. So something to think about for pop-ups.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I speak on that for a second? Can I say
please.
something about that for a second? Because that was something I wanted to mention, is that one of the problems we have in Santa Barbara that's unique to Santa Barbara, or maybe not, is we have these huge spaces, because again, the retail was all built for these big box stores. So even my store, each one is 2,000 square feet headed back, so it's too big. So what I've done and what people are doing, including in the Funk Zone, is get these little collectives together. So that was one of my ideas as well, that if we had this retail recruitment person, or a person that was advocating for retail in this town and recruiting tenants, they could put together 3 small businesses. We do that all the time. We've done that for other businesses, helped them get their business going, and you get 3, they can take over a space, they can afford that lease. But you have to be the go-between between those business and the landlord, since they're still have an older mindset. When we've asked, including my landlord, Bob Bartline, about doing pop-ups over the holidays in empty spaces, they're concerned about the liability, the insurance, who's going to be responsible. These are things we can figure out. This is not, other towns have figured it out. And so that's also where retail is going, and that's a way we could help local entrepreneurs who want to grow but can't take 2,000 square feet. They can take 1,500 square feet. So I think it's a great idea, and that should be absolutely on the list. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Any other panelists want to speak on that before we go to the next question? Okay, the lady in the back, please.
I, wondered what prevented, we love the idea of the housing downtown, and I think Santa Barbara's looked at that in the past with livable cities, things like that, but we don't, we've even built along Chapala Street, that was to be that, or the Santa Barbara Marketplace, Marge Caffarelli put housing next door, but it's always very, very expensive real estate. And gentrification is the wickedest problem that we all face. We can't seem to figure that one out. And our cities, like San Francisco, had all the neighborhoods, had all the things that have been described here, but because of this real estate, this market that we represent here, what would make, even if you put housing in above Macy's or whatever, someone wanting that as just their little vacation spot on the weekend, they come up from Los Angeles and they're willing to pay whatever to have that spot. We already have a third of our housing is not locals living there. It's a second or a third home. So what would make that housing affordable, even if you did put that into the planning, that it was possible?
Well, let me just say that, the landlords have to participate in this, but who's the largest landlord downtown? The city of Santa Barbara. Who owns Macy's land that it sits on? The city of Santa Barbara. Who owns the streetscape and the parking lots downtown? The city of Santa Barbara. Who owns the streets of Santa Barbara? The city of Santa Barbara. Who owns a lot of properties that are sitting on State Street that have other private businesses on them? The city of Santa Barbara. You have to be an active landlord in this process, not a passive one. You have a lot of power as the landlord to shape and design and actually use the bully pulpit to put pressure on those who can use your land the way you want it to be used. And taking a passive approach and letting Chapala Street just develop on its own without taking an active role in it is a waste of a great resource and a waste of a great amount of power that's owned by the city.
I think the other thing with, absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't want to preempt the clap. I apologize. I think the other thing you have to keep in mind, though, is we're at this nexus right now of where I think we can actually get around this cost issue. If you use the AUD program as it's currently designed and you change some of the overlay for it, so you take in some of the land that's facing State Street, you've got the tools of things like, limiting the parking per unit, requiring that it be rental. You've got some of the things that will allow us to build, 700 square foot apartments that only have to have one spot for them, that will rent for something that some of these, these younger tech folks who are already working downtown would gobble up in a heartbeat. We can find ways that we can do things where rather than having to do parking, we can change the rules a little bit to say, look, if you do a car share program, and there's lots of corporations that'll come in and do that for you, you can buy down the number of spots you have. I think there's this great opportunity for us to do that right now as we're going through what we're going to do with this AUD program. Now is the time to do it so we can make sure we can use it on State Street.
Up here in the front. This gentleman over here, Christy, and then next.
Hi, Gene Geller. I've been listening to what everybody has to say. I know Hal for a long time, and in some ways what he was saying could be the model of what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do. Excuse me. In a way, he's saying, let's make State Street fun again. And Hal and I go back because we both have always been interested in entertainment. And his idea of having events and things downtown, the more we're utilizing that, the more it may be able to be closed off. I also liked very much what Angel had to say. By the way, Angel, I was also born and raised in the Bronx. We had 3 stores, my family, within 2 blocks of each other, and everybody except for, well, I didn't, but most of the other people, lived right there, so they had a stake in the community. And if things were not going well, the people that lived there would kind of take charge and try and make it a more friendly place to, let us say, walk around. But I thought what Ken said was also fascinating. You need the right people to be renting. Now, I think you're saying, and what I always do when I travel, sometimes I look at, well, that would be nice in Santa Barbara. And so that's what you're saying, to define, identify, and give them incentives. I think there's another part of it. If we look at, right now we have all sorts of exercise stores, yogurt, more, Starbucks. We didn't want a 7-Eleven. I don't know where that is. And a lot of other, silly restaurants that are going to go broke. Now, if you had a grouping of people that had serious business backgrounds that would review every single person that wanted to rent in Santa Barbara as to their business plan and how well it fit in with Santa Barbara. This shouldn't be a city thing. It should be, a grouping of private business people that, almost like a Shark Tank, if you will, that could review these things and work with the landlords and the city to provide incentives to, to get these innovative ideas in. I think that was all I
Gene, the
said.
fellow behind you needs a microphone.
Hi, I'm Steve Hovdesvin. I'm a managing partner and owner of the Santa Barbara Brewing Company since 1995. And several weeks ago, I did send an email to the city council and the mayor, and I was pleasantly surprised with the response I got. Basically, my ideas were simple. I know they're going to spend a lot of money on a new bike path under the 101. We have the greatest billboard in the world that can be used, the 101 overpass, to say something to the effect of a shopping district this way to get people under. My biggest, it's almost a no-brainer, but when I walk around downtown at night, it is so dark. the army green garbage cans, the street lights, what are they, 60, 70 watts? I don't even know. The safest time of the year for me is Fiesta because all the lights are out. And when the holiday lights go up at the end of Thanksgiving, it gives me a great feeling. We need more lights downtown. Simple comment.
Yeah, to that point, the Academy a couple years back started pushing the city very hard to switch out their sodium lights for LED lights, which are higher power and much cheaper to operate. And the cost of that switch out is actually, you save money doing it. And maybe what you should do, Steve, is you should contact the folks at City Hall because maybe they could build that in as part of that light retrofit program. I haven't heard that idea before, but it seems like the two fit together. Over here on this side of the room now for a moment.
Well, I would like to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight because clearly this is something that has been so important to our city for those of us that love it so much. I too want to start with the things I think are working so beautifully here. Tonight earlier, I'm standing with Jessica and Heather and the owners of Say Cheese, Catherine and Amy. And you look at this group and you think, we have no shortage of amazing young business owners or older business owners that can make a very successful go of it in Santa Barbara. And what I find, and I'm gonna put myself into a black hole here for a second by identifying myself as a State Street building owner. But what we find is no matter what sort of innovative ideas we come up with as landlords, we have this amazing storefront in the 400 block of State Street that, to Amy's point, we're trying to put in these small, very, very talented group of owners. And we can't get the city to get out of the way. You know, when it takes 2 years to get permits for a building, not only for the owners, but for the business owners, we cannot expect small business owners to be able to carry the cost for that long. And for those people that think that all landlords are, just greedy, money-grubbing, terrible people. I'm so proud that I have a husband who has been in this business since the early 70s in Santa Barbara. And he makes it a habit to handpick these talented local businesses. He doesn't rent to Starbucks. He doesn't rent to Coffee Bean. But what the price that we pay for being in Santa Barbara is that we have buildings that are empty for 2 years. For people that recommend that there's a tax for landlords that don't have businesses open, sometimes that tax should be passed on to the city for being obstructionist.
Thank you. This gentleman here.
Michael Flint. A little anecdote, 5, 6, 7 years ago, one of the cruise ships came into town. This retail thing is not a new problem, and Macy's had their biggest day. And I think that's pretty incredible when people get off a cruise ship and go and shop at Macy's. It tells you there's not a lot around downtown that screams of Santa Barbara. With the landslide and the fires, the economists were saying it's going to take a long time for this region to recover, 2, 3, 4 years. And I think, well, that's great, so who's going to do anything about that? Well, so I've talked to a few people around, and a few days ago, last week, I launched a website. It's called sbgreat.com. Stands for Santa Barbara Grassroots Economic Advancement and Tourism. Who really cares about what is. SB Great stands out nicely. There are 2 things that I want to accomplish. One is that I think we need a grassroots word-of-mouth movement to tell everybody we know out of town, come to town because Santa Barbara County is open for business. I think that's hugely important. Let's tell everybody what's going on, what there is to do, great places to shop, etc. The second one is to encourage everybody in this area to shop locally. Who are our local owners, like Amy, for instance, has got great stuff, things like that. So right now, the site is set up as sort of advocating. Come April, we'll start my pledges. If there's anything great about Santa Barbara that's going on, we'll stick it in there. Anybody can ask for anything, and we'll stick it in there, because it's going to take people talking about good stuff that's going on. I don't want it to be political, but since I'll decide what goes on there, then you never know. But basically, it's let's start talking up about what's going on. I had no idea about Amy's shop. I get on here and been there for 8 years, and I'm just absolutely astonished. Okay, well, how come I'm a guy, but there are a whole lot of other people who don't know what's going on. Let's start talking about it, and let's, we're still going to buy stuff on the internet, but let's think about it. Maybe we don't have to. Anyway, that's enough. And if anybody wants a card from me,
the lady in the back row has had her hand up a long time. Thank you.
I'm very patient, and
are.
I can tell you that because I have 2 stores downtown and have had them for 10 years. So one of them is on Lower State in the 500 block, and one is in the 700 block. There's a significant difference in the kind of traffic, 700 and 500, yeah. Thank you. But there's a significant difference in what I experience in those 2 blocks, the 700 block being very locally driven, and the 500 block being mostly tourist-driven when there are tourists in town. But I wanted to just kind of reinforce what Amy was talking about, the size of the stores being such a challenge. One of the reasons I think I am still successful, besides the fact that I'm there and I care and I love Santa Barbara, is that I do have 2 small square footage stores. So I can handle the rents. The ratio makes sense with the amount of traffic that we have. And I just really think that it would be nice if we could, this incubator idea, green light, getting these pop-ups, not pop-ups in, but these small combined collectives in. And the last thing about that, I think it's wonderful for us to go elsewhere and recruit. I do. And I think that there are some great concepts, but I'd love to see an incubator that kind of takes those concepts and they're homegrown. Because when I watch the stores here over time, the people that make it are the people that, I lived here before I had a store. It's the people that love it and are willing to do what it takes to make it in this community. And I've seen so many people that have a store somewhere else, open one here, and really can't meet the challenges of Santa Barbara. So anyway, I love the incubator idea, and maybe carving up the stores a little smaller. Thank you.
Go ahead. This woman here, please. This lady right here. This is going to be the last official question. I'm going to ask the panelists. We're supposed to end at 7:30. It's 7:30, and I want to respect everybody's time. But if the panelists will stay for a little bit longer, and if you can make it, great. And the audience, if you want to stay, we'll keep it going. But we had said we'd end at 7:30. Yeah, and there's information, as Judy's saying, on these sheets that you were handed out, there's information on everyone, so you can email them. You can always contact the Academy. We'll find them for you. And please continue the conversation after tonight. It should not end tonight. This is the beginning, not the end. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Rubenstein. I have the Silo Gallery down in the Funk Zone. And I wanted to do a pop-up, a live painting pop-up, this past November, and it was just crazy trying to get landlords to agree to let us use the space. Finally, with Kate's help, I was able to find a landlord that did help us. And my hope was that to be able to continue the process. The event was hugely successful. We had so many people in, and they loved it. And I wanted to try to figure out how we could do some more art in that area. And I have been looking and looking and looking, and the rents have been so crazy that it doesn't make it worth it to try to run a gallery. The other thing I wanted to say was that in designing how State Street will look, one thing that you may consider is critical mass. Because I think like if you have a bunch of art galleries in one place, a bunch of furniture stores in another place, whatever retail is interesting, but to have it more collectively assembled, it becomes a destination. If there are a half a dozen art galleries in one section, people are going to be coming from LA, and they'll be coming from all over the place because they know there's quality to be found instead of having to go one place here, another place there, another place there. So that's just what I had to say.
So that's the end of our official program. Please feel free to leave if you would like to, and for those who wish to stay, The panelists will stay a little bit longer. We'll take some more questions.
Marcia Bailey, Women's Economic Ventures. Thank you for putting on just an incredible program. I really appreciate all the ideas that have been put forth. And I just want to say that we are really eager to work with all of you in the community who have innovative ideas as an organization that provides loans and training for many of the retail businesses in our area. It's really important for us to work with you and to know how do we make those businesses stronger. And we've had a lot of kind of organic collectives that have happened over the years, but I think we should do that more purposefully. So, and then I just had one other thing that on the housing front, many of you may have seen a couple weeks ago in the New York Times, there was a really interesting article about a developer in San Francisco who was creating dormitories. And it was fascinating, and people wanted to be there. So people had basically a room, and then every floor had kitchens that they, in kitchens, of course, and bathrooms are the expensive part about development. So I just hope that the city is really open to innovative ideas around zoning and ideas like that to create affordable housing.
Ken, do you want to?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things is you certainly, as we avail ourselves of the opportunity to learn from others, which is always important, we can look at some of these cities. The hottest housing in the downtown Seattle area right now is not condos. It's not even one-bedroom apartments or studios. It's actually shared housing like that. They don't do it by floor. What they'll often do is they'll build them so that you'll have an entryway with a common kitchen and living room, and then 4 bedrooms off with their own locked doors. So you essentially have 1/4 of that apartment. All of the leasing is done through the entity, so you don't have to worry about one person having. They're all equal folks within there, and a ton of people who work like at Amazon in downtown Seattle. That's where they're living, or in buildings like that. So.
Okay, one more. Oh. Wait.
Everybody seems to agree, I'm Lala, by the way, part of the World Business Academy, that housing is the way to go. We want more housing downtown. Are there specific projects that are underway or developers that are working on something that we can root for, or is it just all amorphous? Or, what specifically might be happening that could give us hope?
There are some things. They're not right on State Street at this point, but they're at least adjacent to the downtown area. I think part of the work that the City Council is going to be doing on reviewing the AUD can help us to push some of that onto State Street. I will say, we had the question at the beginning about the Macy's building. I think that's probably that and the Saks building are probably the 2 buildings that we're going to potentially see the first efforts at this on. The Saks building, they leased back to Saks for another year. I think once that lease is done, they already have plans about what they're going to do there. The Macy's building is the most interesting one because, yeah, it's city-owned land. The building is now controlled by the managers of Paseo Nuevo, and they've been very clear that they want to do a concept like this, where they're going to do multiple floors of housing above and something retail. They've been very clear about that. There's no plan at this point. They're still going through it. I think one of the things we need to acknowledge, though, is that in order to make that work, the plan that they come up with may very well be that they scrape that building and put something else new there. Because it may be that those floors are so high that trying to actually reuse that building, the cost is going to actually be more than if they scrape it and put something else new on that site. And so we just need to be open to the fact that in order to make this work, I mean, that's not a historic building. Others we need to be concerned about. I think if to make this work, we have to put a different building there. I think we need to be open to having that conversation.
Please, this lady in the second row.
In defense of the City Council, Kathy has agreed to meet with me for a half hour tomorrow about all these issues, so I'm really happy about that. A couple of things that have not been brought up that I think are important to think about when you're talking about auxiliary housing units. It doesn't matter if we create more if people can't afford to live in them. So what about the city creating an incentive that they have, say for example, if I want to build one in my house, they give me a free permit, and it's a fast-track permit, and if I agree to rent that for, say, 50 to 70% below market value, say they'll even grandfather in some issues that maybe didn't have anything to do with safety violations, because that's a big problem for people that have old houses, right? That's just one thought. The other thought, well, two actually, the other thought about housing is there's incredible creative ways of handling Section 8 subsidized housing and getting those loans from the feds that also include supporting artisans and artists. It's not just for people who are no to low income. Those people are often low to no income. So you can actually target your subsidized housing to that. The other issue that hasn't come up is that if we're going to create this concept of having these collectives, why not those collectives be something that is run by, say, for example, the city, but it employs people in the, like we help them figure out whatever it is they produce that are maybe homeless people, and so they become a cooperative and a collective in which they own ownership in that, but it's not run by them. There's all kinds of creative ways to handle this that I don't think we brought up, that I think we need to think about completely outside the box of what anyone else has ever done. So that's...
With that, Judy, you want to give them your outside-the-box idea?
I have an outside-the-box idea. I hope the city is listening to it. We do a lot in this community and have large events, and we have no convention center. We have no way to bring larger groups in to give us money to use our space, and for our nonprofits, the only way that we can do events in this town is to do it in hotels that are owned by outsiders that are not keeping the money in our town. I think a convention center, small or large, is something we should at least look at, and I think it could bring money into our place. Yes, please tell us what.
I could not agree with you more. I think you're absolutely right. I will tell you a very quick anecdote. When Macy's announced that it was closing, within about 2 days, I got a call from a former council member who I will protect his anonymity. But he called me to say, hey, Ken, what do you think about taking the Macy's building and making that a convention center? And I said, I'm really, really happy you suggested that, because obviously you also are going to agree to what would end up having to be a 30-story hotel tower right next to it to make it work. And that was the end of the conversation. I think you're absolutely right. I think what we have to acknowledge, though, is sort of, if we're talking about a standard convention center for a community our size, we're going to have a hotel attached to it to make it work, or financially, generally those don't work. We can certainly look at something smaller, though, that is more just community oriented. I think there's some plays like that, whether it's downtown, whether it's a different part of the city. The fact that we have a city with the resources we have, all the nonprofits we have, and we essentially only have 2 large places that we can have events, and one of them right now is closed, is really unfortunate, and it causes a lot of problems. So I agree with you.
So with that, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Our staff needs to get home too. One thought, if you leave with nothing else tonight, let's all think outside the box and make more beauty from this. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much.